Yes, I see.
I'm sorry,
right here,
Catherine, I'm
DNA.
confused.
Yes.
Yes.
So,
Do we have DNA?
that's what I don't know. I have,
That's what we want. DNA.
oh, is this it?
Can we see 1D and 1H?
Yes. I don't think I have it in my packet, which is fine, I just want to be able to refer to it. So this is your one
Do you need anything else?
What I was confused about is 10A and then we only have that.
I would go from 10A after this, so the email and the other emails with Wells.
This is how, I just want to make sure that I've broken them down correctly. And would it help you if I kept them in this? No,
Yes, this is perfect. 1B and 1A. And I still need you to strike the ID on those. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Great.
Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for the honorable court. Merrimack County Superior Court is reconvened. Please be seated.
Witness,
Yes, Judge, we have an agreement to call one witness out of turn.
oh, that's fine,
To
okay,
accommodate, thank you.
sure.
We would call witness Scott Morin to the stand. Mr. Morin, will you stand for everything? Just stay standing when you were. Can you raise your right hand? Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under the pains and penalties of perjury?
I do.
You can have a seat with the court's permission. Mr. Morin, can you state your first name and last name and spell your last name for the record, please?
Scott Morin, M-O-R-I-N,
And where are you employed?
St. Paul's School.
And were you employed there in 2013-2014 academic year?
Yes, I was.
And in what capacity?
Director of Information Technology.
What are your duties there?
I oversee the computer networking and telecommunications group for the campus.
Are you familiar with the email and computer systems available to St. Paul students?
Yes, I am.
Just want to take one brief moment to talk about what the SPS server looks like. And I think this has come out earlier. I am not technically savvy, so if I ask a poor question, please let me know that and I will reframe my question. Are you able to limit the people who have access to send emails from the SPS email?
Yes.
Do you have to approve people before they are able to be part of the SPS intranet system?
Yes.
Generally speaking, who is approved to be part of the SPS intranet system?
Faculty, staff, or students?
So individuals known to be part of the SPS community?
Yes.
Is there a guest login?
We have a guest Wi-Fi network for visitors.
Is that password protected?
No.
Is the SPS intranet available to unauthorized users?
No.
Could I, as a private citizen, create an SPS email or use that on the intranet?
No.
And a random stranger could not create an email address and use the intranet to communicate with students?
No, they couldn't.
Is the SPS intranet password protected?
Yes.
And if asked, could you produce a list of every person who uses the SPS intranet?
Yes.
Is that system described in the St. Paul's handbook?
I don't believe we refer to it as an intranet. We just talk about the SPS network.
Okay. Judge, may I approach the witness, please?
Yes.
This is on these days. 107 to 117.
Mr. Morin, I'm going to show you a document that's already been marked as Exhibit 26. Can you take a look at that document for me? Are you familiar with what that is?
Yes.
Can you tell me what it is?
This page is our acceptable use of technology policy. This document's part of our student handbook.
Have there been any changes, any significant changes to that policy since the 2013-2014 school year?
No.
And if I tell you that is the 2014 handbook, I'm sorry, strike that, Judge. Would all students have been provided with a copy of that handbook?
Yes, the Dean of Students hands them out opening days.
And does that handbook articulate the SPS, I think you said it was called the SPS Internet?
We call it SPS Network.
SPS Net?
Yep.
Okay. Does that handbook contain email privacy policies?
There is a section about student privacy, yes.
Do St. Paul students have an SPS email address?
Yes.
And who hosts that email?
We host it.
And how do students access their email?
It depends on the device they use, but they'll either connect via a smartphone, a personal laptop or computer, or a campus computer, both on and off campus.
So if a student on campus is using a laptop to communicate or email a student, how would they go about doing that?
They would in all likelihood be connected to SPS Net, which would connect back to the email server located in our data center.
So in your data center, that means that the email would stay on the intranet,
Correct.
and it would not access the broader internet,
Unless they were sending outbound, no.
unless they were sending what, I'm sorry?
Outbound from the campus to an outside address.
Okay. So outbound address meaning an email address, not an SPS email address?
Correct.
So emails sent from computers on campus from one SPS email address to another SPS email address would use the intranet system,
If they're on SPS Network, yes.
if they're on the SPS network. Are you able to tell what messages stayed on the intranet as opposed to those sent through the internet?
It'd have to be more specific. In general, no, not after the fact unless it was in the logs.
If it was in the logs?
If it was in the logs, which overwrite over a period of time, so.
How quickly do they overwrite?
It depends on volume, so I couldn't give you a specific time, but less than a week.
Are there limits on the hours during which St. Paul students can access their SPS email?
It varies, but in general, between midnight to 6 a.m., we block outside internet access, so they wouldn't, but we don't block access to the email server at any point.
I want to speak briefly about the privacy of emails sent on the SPS email address, you were contacted by the Concord Police Department and asked to preserve and provide basically copies of various students' email accounts. Is that accurate?
Correct.
And how were you able to do that?
I archived in a complete snapshot of their live mailbox at that time, as well as a 30-day backup snapshot of their mailbox.
So what would that have included?
It's a complete copy of everything in their email folder, copied to a file that's readable.
So it would have included inbox
Yes.
and outbox,
Yes.
notes,
Yes.
and deleted messages?
Yes.
Would it have included contacts?
No.
You had full and easy access to those emails?
Yes.
Is it your policy that St. Paul's School blocks various internet content?
Just a couple of protected categories: pornography, gambling, and hacking.
So basically, St. Paul's takes control of the material that's available to their students through the intranet?
Our firewall automatically blocks URLs that are addressed to those types of sites. It's categorized.
Were you contacted by Attorney Carney or anyone else working for the defense before Owen's trial in 2015?
No.
You were contacted after the fact, though?
Yes.
And were you willing to provide an interview and communicate with the attorney who contacted you?
Yes.
Judge, may I approach the witness?
Yes.
So I'm showing you a document. I would represent to you that it shows an email that was sent. This is 1A. Do you recognize that to be an email?
It does appear to be an email, yes.
Are you able to tell if that was sent on your network?
No, not definitively, no.
Is there any way you could have told?
If I had an electronic copy of the file, possibly.
He said if you have an electronic copy available, you may possibly be able to. Can I have just 1 second?
Yes.
Judge, I would ask to strike the ID and mark the document with the witness as a full exhibit.
No objection.
Granted.
Thank you, Mr. Morin. I have no questions. I believe the state may have some questions for you.
Cross-examination?
Before I start, I need to look at the exhibit you had. What was that exhibit number?
It was 1. I left it with the witness.
Let's see how many pages are in that. Oh, not that one, the handbook. The one from the handbook.
He's
This one?
stretching it out to you.
Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, good afternoon, Mr. Morin. I'd like to start with a few general questions about the different kinds of computers and other devices that can connect to the St. Paul Schools intranet, or you're calling it St. Paul's Net. I know you've talked about that briefly, maybe just in a little more detail, please.
Devices connecting to our network at any
Yes,
given
it does.
time. It might be a cell phone, a smartphone, a tablet, a PC or a Macintosh, computer or laptop.
So, starting with, do you have some devices that connect via the Ethernet? Do you have an Ethernet? And some devices connect directly to the Ethernet, correct?
Yes, we do have hardwired and wireless connections.
And those are called your public workstations? Do you have public workstations that
Yes.
connect to that?
Yes, we do.
How many of those do you have?
At this time, close to 300.
Would you agree with, would it surprise you that if the 2013-14 student manual with the information section says more than 500, would that be an error, or could that be?
No, that'd be correct. We've decreased
Okay.
the number of public computers.
So 2013-14, you may have had more than 500, which it said in the manual?
Yes.
Okay. Other Ethernet connections, those are the 500 public use computers that are available. Then you have Ethernet connectors that can be plugged into if somebody has the appropriate equipment, correct?
Correct.
And that would typically be a laptop or any other device that has an Ethernet interface?
Correct.
Can you tell us how many, where are those connections available?
All the student dorm rooms will have the opportunity for a hardwired connection upon request versus Wi-Fi, which is throughout the entire campus.
So student dorms and administration faculty buildings, I'm talking about the Ethernet connections only?
Yeah, through all the administrative buildings, through basically every building on campus has some sort of Ethernet.
Okay. Do you have any idea, as a typical matter, of how many, in a busy day, for example, how many would be connected in that manner to the SPNet? I'm just speaking of hardwired connections.
Hardwired in excess of 500.
Okay. Do you have tools, IT tools, that would let you to look and see how many are online at any given point in time? How many devices are online?
I could probably look and get a feel for how many devices are on.
During a real busy time, what would be the most that you've ever seen, or that you think you might have ever seen?
I'd be speculating.
Still the 500 number, 500 plus number?
Yeah, easily, yeah.
Now, regarding Wi-Fi, can you just enumerate the types of devices that can use Wi-Fi?
Any device that can validate to our SPS secure network, or a device that could connect up to the guest network.
Would it be, will some laptops have Wi-Fi?
Yes,
Obviously cell phones,
yes,
mobile devices. Tablets?
yes.
Okay. How many Wi-Fi capable devices are there on campus at any given time? Could you give just a rough estimate?
It would, a guesstimate would be in excess of 1,000 devices on our campus right now.
Would you have an opinion that every student probably has a Wi-Fi device?
Yes,
And every faculty,
yes,
administrators?
yes.
Are there other people that use, for example, maintenance people, would they be using Wi-Fi as well?
Some would in the course of their job, yes.
If you add in, well, let me back up, what would be the busiest time for the SPS net in terms of the heaviest load of users? What would those times be?
Judge, I would object. I don't understand the relevance of the load on the Wi-Fi system to the.
I'm trying to characterize the nature of the intranet that they have on the campus. I think the issue is, the reason is because we're trying to determine whether the statute may apply, and I think a description of the nature of their intranet is relevant to that. So, do you have a sense of, at the peak time, when would that be? What would the peak times be for usage?
Peak network usage is usually in the evenings around between 9 and 11 when the student body's back in the student houses.
And I'd asked you before about a number of hardwired connections that would be there. If you add in the Wi-Fi's, what would that number then be during peak usage?
Again, in excess of 1,000
In
possible
excess of 1,000.
devices.
Excuse me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. The Wi-Fi, where does that work? Where can you get connected to the system through Wi-Fi?
We have wireless access in about 80 to 85% of our buildings on campus. So it's ubiquitous in all our academic spaces, all our student spaces, all our dormitories, and most operational areas of campus.
Does it also work out in some areas outdoors?
Yes, we have some outdoor locations.
Do you have some that you have been verified that you know that they work outdoors, like around a dorm, or is there any area that's known to work in?
Yes, in front of the library, there's a big grass field. Outside of some of our academic buildings, we've created outdoor access point locations.
They're created to be outdoor access?
Correct.
While a device is connected to the St. Paul's School intranet, would you say that, would it be correct to say that that is then a part of the intranet for the time that it's correct connected?
Yes.
So the size of the intranet would vary then, wouldn't it, based on the number of devices connected to it,
Theoretically, yes.
used the way we're talking about? Okay. I wanted to ask you a few more questions about the relation between the internet and the St. Paul's intranet. I have a few questions for you on that subject now. Okay.
Okay.
Do students use browser programs to access resources on the St. Paul's intranet?
Yes.
What are the commonly used browsers?
If it's a Mac, it would be Safari or Firefox. If it's PC, it's typically Firefox, Chrome,
Internet
or
Explorer?
Internet Explorer, yes.
Okay. Those same browsers would allow access to the internet, correct?
Correct.
And to sites on the World Wide Web.
Correct.
To go from accessing St. Paul's School intranet to the, St. Paul's School's intranet to the internet, it's not necessary for a student to use a different browser, is it?
No.
In fact, there's not, you just put in the address that you want to go to, and wherever it is, it should find it, presuming
Correct.
it's not blocked. Is that correct?
Correct.
St. Paul's School's internet follows the fundamental protocols that are used throughout the internet. Is that correct?
Correct.
Objection, Judge. I don't know what those fundamental protocols would be or how the state intends to introduce them.
I'll just, the
Well,
question
it's a
speaks for
question
itself.
of-
I have a few more questions that might clarify.
Okay.
That's fine.
So, the primary, what would be the fundamental protocol that would allow communication over the internet? Is it TCP/IP? Would that be correct?
That is correct.
Objection, Judge. The gentleman has not been qualified as an expert. If the state wished to introduce this information, they were free to bring a witness who is capable of doing it.
I think he's not really, he's speaking as the person that's in charge of the network. And
I think he can talk about the protocols that his network uses overall.
Okay. And it's the fact that St. Paul's School uses that protocol that allows the student to be able to go and browse anywhere without having to change software. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And let me just add one other thing to my ruling, the issue being what information would have been ascertained if this issue had been investigated. I think this witness can answer that.
So that was about browsing the internet versus browsing St. Paul's School intranet and the resources there. Now we turn to email. The St. Paul School intranet also follow the fundamental electronic mail protocols that are used throughout the internet.
Yes.
And the most basic of these, am I correct, would be called SMTP, SMTP, would that be the fundamental one?
In our case, no.
What's the one in your case?
We use the Exchange Protocol, RPC protocol. We do have limited SMTP and POP3, but we primarily use the Exchange email, which is another standard of the internet.
This also permits emails to flow without the user being concerned about where it will go, correct?
Correct.
So the same program, for example, webmail, or Outlook that a person uses to send emails to St. Paul's intranet would also be used to send emails throughout the internet.
That's correct.
Would it be fair to say that from the user's point of view, there's a seamless transition from the St. Paul School intranet to the internet?
Yes,
And that's whether the person's using a browser or sending and receiving email, correct?
correct.
Okay. I had some questions about the emails. First of all, can you tell me how many individual email accounts there are at St. Paul School?
It'd be hard to give you a definitive number. I can tell you we have one for every user on campus, faculty, staff, and student, and then as well as a number of customized ones for clubs, organizations, things like that.
You have a ballpark estimate of the total number?
Close to 1,000.
Every student has one, correct?
Correct.
How about faculty, every faculty?
Correct.
Retired faculty?
Some.
Some retired faculty. Administrators?
Yes.
Retired administrators?
Some.
Maintenance and groundskeepers?
Yes.
What about family members of faculty administrators? Are any family members given email accounts for any
Yes.
Okay. Now, what about students that leave the institution? Isn't it correct that St. Paul's, if they leave in good standing, then they have a 6-month period when they can use the St. Paul's email address?
In 2013, we retired accounts on November 1st, post-graduation. We've moved that up a little since then.
I don't think I understood. Is there a period of time when somebody leaves the school in good standing that they can continue to use the email?
Yes,
And what is that period of time?
through November 1st, following graduation.
Okay. Which is, okay, about 6 months approximately.
5 months. Yeah.
May is, yeah, okay. As a general rule, the email address will be the first initial followed by the last name, followed by @sps.edu.
At the time that this incident took place, yes, it was.
Okay. And every email account has a password.
Yes.
In order to access the email server, I think you've already testified that you need to log in with your user ID and password.
The email program will need to pass credentials. If you're going through the website, yes, you would need your login, user ID, and password.
There's more than one ways to access the mail server, but isn't it the case that whatever way you use, you've got to provide your email ID plus your password?
Yes.
Okay. Once you're logged in, then you can look at your incoming mail and you can compose and send email, correct?
Yes.
Now, when a person with a St. Paul's School email address receives an email from another St. Paul's School email address, the recipient can't determine exactly where the sender was physically located when he sent it, can he?
No.
So that would be an example if a sender using a mobile device, he could tell the recipient in the email that he was alone in his dorm room or in the library when he was really somewhere else with a group of people looking on, correct? He could put that in there and there wouldn't be anything in the email itself that would contradict it.
There's nothing in the email that would indicate anything.
He could be outside the dorm room of the person he was emailing if Wi-Fi reached there.
Correct.
And I have a few questions.